Welcome back, everybody. I'm Haley. I own and operate Shaw Creek Cattle Company, and today I am taking you along as I get the grain ready for the fat pen. And in the meantime, I'm going to tell you about why I started Shaw Creek Cattle Company, what inspired me, and some of the problems I faced as time went on. Come along. From the time that I thought of the concept of Shaw Creek Cattle Company to the time that I actually had product to sell, it took me about 4 years, which sounds like a long time, but as you'll see, it was completely necessary. Hopefully that's not creating too much extra noise. One of the reasons that I started Shaw Creek Cattle Company was I saw an opportunity to have our cows that we already had basically pay for themselves to some degree. Prior to this, we were sometimes selling heifers. We didn't really keep any steers back unless I needed one for a 4-H market project, but the cows were definitely not the focus. In fact, much of my 4-H career, I spent more time involved in the horse program than I did the market program. When 2020 hit, it opened a lot of people's eyes to the reality that Alaska does not have a very stable or resilient food system. In fact, we import over 95% of our food, which means that if all the borders were to shut down, we couldn't get any trucks through Canada, which is how most of our food comes to Alaska, is by truck. We only have enough food in the state to last us 3 days. That is really bad. What followed that realization was, first, everybody and their mother became a farmer overnight, and everybody started with chickens. It got so bad that I know of people who started missing chickens because people were stealing them. Eventually, people realized that chickens really don't have the best return on investment. So they either stopped with the chickens and decided to support the people who were already, producing meat, or they took a different approach entirely. What this meant for producers, especially the ones that were already producing beef and already selling, there was an opportunity to fill a gap. Like I said earlier, we already had the cows, but we weren't selling direct-to-consumer beef. We weren't really selling beef at all. However, despite already having the cattle, I still needed to put some things into motion so that I could efficiently and effectively sell beef. Pretty much from the beginning, due to research and what I saw other people in the lower 48 doing, I decided pretty early on that I at least wanted to do the beef boxes, the variety packs. I wanted to do the boxes for a number of reasons, one of which is the fact that storage-wise, it's a lot easier to store a 50-pound box than it is to store a half steer. And for a lot of people, even in Alaska, they just don't have the room for it. Another reason is cost. With the whole or half or quarter steer, that's a lot of money for people to be able to shell out all at one time. With the beef boxes, they can scatter it out. They can buy one box this month, they can buy another box this month, they can buy, a lot of personalization is available. So that was my first decision, was I wanted to sell by the box. Now, before I can sell by the box, I have to have the animals. In 2021, I did not have the animals. Like I said, I had cows and I had some heifers that were going to be new calvers. And yes, you can absolutely use cows and heifers, as your beef products, but I didn't really want to because that's my breeding herd. More than that, though, I needed a way to bring in new genetics. Because as nice as my cows are, there's always room for improvement. the way that I solved that problem was by going to an artificial insemination school in Texas. And this year, I'm proud to say that I'll have my biggest AI crop that I've had so far, and I expect it to only go up from there. Okay. Probably one of the biggest issues that I face on an almost daily basis is the farm infrastructure. Now, I'm very fortunate. I had a lot of this stuff already in place from my parents and from, previous owners of this farm. However, it was also set up for dairy cattle. Dairy cattle require different management than beef cattle. But right out of the gate, dairy cows are a lot more docile than beef cows. They get handled more. Dairy cattle will get into a routine because they get milked daily, and they'll just follow you right in. You don't have to herd them into places. Not so much with beef cows. You need infrastructure to be able to herd them where you want them to go. And because this place was set up as a dairy farm, we don't have a lot of that. So that's something that I've been working very, very hard on. Part of the problem is that most of our panels don't match, and over the years, you lose pins, you gotta jerry rig something up. It's not the most stable thing in the world. I think it was 2023, we had the opportunity to buy a squeeze chute, a used one. And it literally revolutionized our ability to do what I do today. I don't think I could do what I currently do today without the squeeze chute. I highly recommend that one of the first big purchases you make is a squeeze chute. With the squeeze chute, however, you need to have a working pen. And like I said, most of our panels don't fit together. They don't match, pins lost. You already heard me talk about it. So for the last several years, I've had to jerry rig together a working pen. And this last year, I was actually able to get a really good system together. And it's one that I plan to repeat. However, in the future, I would still like to buy a real working pen because that's just a lot safer overall. When you have just panels like what you typically see for temporary pens, the cows can move them, and even though I put T-posts in, if a cow really gets ranking on something, they could pretty easily bend that. The other side of that is breeding docile animals that won't push that.
Get in there! Come on, you stupid cows!
Another problem that we face every year is feed. Currently, we hay about 170 acres, and that is just enough for 20 animals. However, that is also dependent on whether we have a good summer, whether we have enough rain, enough sunshine, making sure, the summer's not too wet, summer's not too dry. Basically, everything has to work together. Otherwise, it doesn't matter that we have 170 acres. It's not going to produce like we need it to. Fertilizer is a huge cost, and it seems to only be going up every single year. So one of the things that I am trying to do is I'm trying to make our hayfield a lot more resilient. I am trying to introduce more variety into our forage. Right now, we primarily have brome hay. And there is yarrow mixed in there. There are some native grasses mixed in with it. But if I can introduce more and I can make our hayfield more resilient, then we don't necessarily have to use more fertilizer. We don't have to depend on the weather to be absolutely perfect. Now, like I said, with the feed, when I first started out, when I finally had my set of steers that were going to be the first products we were going to sell, after they were born, we had 2 really bad hay years. Ideally, I wanted to be able to sell steers by the time they were 18 months old. I wanted them finished out, and that did not happen. It took about twice as long as I thought it would, primarily because of poor forage quality. By the time they were finally ready, they were 30 months old, which that increases our costs to keep them. It increases everything. The longer you keep an animal, the more cost you're putting into. However, you also don't want to spend a bunch of money on inputs to try to get them to finish out quicker. So now my current goal is 2 years. Another thing I decided early on was I did want my steers to be grain finished, or at least partially grain fed. Our cows during the wintertime, they get hay, a free choice basically, so do our steers, and then the steers get supplemented with spent grain. Spent brewer's grain is what some beers are made out of. If you go to Big Delta Brewing Company, that's what they make their beer out of. This is spent grain. This is primarily barley and wheat, and it depends on what type of, how much barley, how much wheat, other things. It is a really good source of protein and energy for cows. It is also about the only cheap grain I can ever get my hands on. Everything else costs me a lot. This pretty much just cost me the price of the trash buckets that I use, these buckets, and the fuel to go get it. And finally, what I thought would end up being my most difficult challenge is the marketing side. I am not much of a people person. I'm very much an introvert, and marketing requires to put yourself out there. It requires to sell yourself. And for a long time, I had a very dim view of marketing. I looked at it as very predatory, manipulative, kind of culty sometimes. But what I've realized in the years since then, that really it's really just relationships. I'm trying to build a relationship with my consumer. I'm trying to solve a problem for the consumer. I think I've yapped long enough. I need to get this out to the steers, and we will continue this. Oh, whoops. Okay, guys. Hi, buddy. So one of the things that I focused on as I started marketing was I started with a website. I think if you're going to do this, you definitely need some kind of website, because otherwise, if social media goes down, then you have no way of connecting with your customers. If there is a website, then there's a landing page they can go to and get in contact with you, and you're not at the mercy of old Zucky.
You're smarter than Mark Zuckerberg and those.
Well, I hope you guys learned something. I would encourage anybody that wants to start a beef business that you can do it here. You just have to face some unique challenges, and maybe you can avoid some of the mistakes I made. Thanks, guys.